Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We need to urgently reduce the level of transmission in our province.
Deadly weekend. 17 COVID-19 deaths in BC. Almost 2,000 new cases. Also.
Well, I was pretty surprised that they said we were South Asian people with status cards.
Telling transcript. What a 911 call reveals about the arrests of an Indigenous man and his granddaughter at a Vancouver BMO. And back to nearly normal. CBC News returns to the Chinese city that was ground zero of the coronavirus pandemic.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. It is not clear tonight if tougher restrictions are having an impact on the COVID-19 pandemic in our province. Health orders were brought in 2 weeks ago in the Vancouver Coastal and Fraser Health regions and expanded province-wide last week. But new case numbers are still fluctuating between 500 and 700 a day. And it was another deadly weekend, the virus killing 17 more people, bringing BC's total to 348. Hospitalizations continue to rise, now at 277, 59 of those people in intensive care. Active cases now over 7,300, and there are 10,200 people under active public health monitoring. There were 6 new healthcare outbreaks over the weekend, 60 in total now, and just over 1,900 tests returned positive test results since Friday's update. Fraser Health accounting for 67% of those new cases. Now, when it comes to those public health orders the provincial health officer put in place to combat this spike in numbers, she says there's been a lot of confusion. Our Zara Premji joins us now live in studio with more on this. So Zara, what did Dr. Henry have to say about the confusions around what is and what's not okay?
Well, simply put, Dr. Henry says if you have to question an event or an order or look for a workaround, it will likely not and should not happen until after December 7th. She says if you're looking for a loophole, then just don't.
Also suspended all events as defined in my gatherings and events order. And that apparently I needed some details in it. So with the exception being funerals, weddings, and ceremonies such as baptisms, which have increased restrictions on them. But it does include events at hotels, restaurants, bars, and does include movie theaters and cinemas.
She adds the holiday festivities are not canceled, they're just on pause until December 7th. Now, when it comes to sports, teams that are made up of players who live in different but nearby health regions, Dr. Henry says her orders from last week are about movement of teams to play in different areas and don't restrict you from playing with your own team. But the order remains in place that no spectators are allowed in person. However, she is reminding us to get creative. Online is not suspended. Mike.
And Zara, Dr. Henry got a bit emotional today during her briefing, speaking about the 17 deaths being mainly seniors and long-term care residents. We're seeing so many long-term care facilities facing outbreaks constantly. What does she have to say about all that?
Well, Dr. Henry says knowing so much transmission is happening in long-term care is very sobering. Like you said, you could hear that sadness in her voice as she used those words today. Now, she was asked how the spread keeps happening, and from what we know so far about the outbreaks, many are stemming from an asymptomatic staff member. She says others are passing all screening measures in the clear, then discovering the next day they were showing symptoms, but they may have been in the long-term care facility without knowing they had COVID to begin with previously. Dr. Henry says while some want to see rapid testing for healthcare workers each time they enter a long-term care facility, she says that's not going to solve the problem because she says the tests do have faults and limitations. She says the volume of testing they'd require is not at a point where it would be helpful for us. Now, looking at the restrictions, the rapid testing, and the lists of questions that are flooding through about COVID-19 as a whole, Dr. Henry did something a little different. She went a little personal. Take a listen.
But I've come to think of it really as an Ironman race. I've run marathons, but I've never run an Ironman. We don't know exactly when this part of the race is going to end and when we're going to move into the next phase. But we all know that while you may have to slow down when you're going uphill, we can get over the top, and we can enjoy the downhill on the other side.
Now, still a ways to go before we can get to the downhill of that Ironman, Mike, but she's very optimistic, as you can hear in her voice.
That was nice to hear that. All right, Zara, thanks very much. Zara Premji with the live update here tonight. Now, as mentioned, the pandemic is putting a damper on the start of the Christmas season and some very popular events that usually light up the season. As Karen Larson reports, some outdoor festivities that were set to go are suddenly slamming on the holiday brakes.
Think of these as the sights and sounds of Christmas past, at least for now, while the specter of COVID-19 throws a wrench in the start of the 2020 holiday season. Both the Stanley Park Christmas Train and Van Dusen Gardens Festival of Lights are on hold for the time being, victims, among others, of the latest pandemic restrictions, which bar events and gatherings.
I know this has meant delaying the opening of some very great and well thought out seasonal events like the Holiday Train in Stanley Park and the Bouchard Garden Light Display, among many others that had previously been approved across the province. Those are suspended.
The Christmas train was supposed to leave the station starting Thursday, and Van Dusen was set to flip the switch on 1 million Christmas lights on Friday. Instead, both Vancouver Park Board sites will be dark until at least December 7th, when the current health order expires, and possibly beyond. One event still hoping to go ahead as planned is the PNE's drive-through Winter Lights, starting December 11th, where patrons remain in the bubble safety of their car. But for the time being, Christmas is cancelled, at least until the province gets a grip on the virus.
We need to take a pause, whether you call it a circuit break. Now, for these next 2 weeks in this province, all of us need to stop these events and pause.
Karen Larson, CBC News, Vancouver.
An Indigenous grandfather who was handcuffed along with his 12-year-old granddaughter at a downtown bank of Montreal have launched 2 human rights complaints. It happened back in March, and today, transcripts of a confusing 911 call to Vancouver police by the branch manager were released. As the CBC's Angela Sterrett reports, critics say the communication reveals clear examples of systemic racism.
All those hard to see her stand there in cuffs and...
It was supposed to be routine. Maxwell Johnson and his granddaughter Torianne opening up a bank account. What happened next changed everything. The branch manager thought Johnson was committing a fraud by using what she thought were fake IDs, but in fact were government-issued Indian status cards. The 911 transcript reveals the manager didn't understand what a status card was. Furthermore, she was confused, unable to provide a clear description. Quote, one seems to be like a teenager and the other one, claiming to be her grandfather, an older white gentleman. The 911 operator asks for clarification, quote, and then we said, South Asian race? To which the BMO branch manager replies, yeah.
Well, I was pretty surprised that they said we were South Asian people with status cards, and it just blew my mind when they said that.
One of the cards contained a clerical error, and the manager says Johnson recently deposited a large sum of money all Celtic members received as part of an Aboriginal settlement. The call also reveals the manager called what she thought was the Indian government for advice, to which the 911 operator says, quote, sorry, why were we told by the Indian government to call? To which the BMO manager says, quote, I said, do I need to keep their ID and do you recommend I call the authorities because they have fake ID? This customer's account has $23,000 in it. And they said, yes, to contact the police and keep the ID. Upon further questioning, the manager says she called Indigenous Services Canada for advice.
You know, a caller or a person on the other end of the phone, you know, recommending or giving advice to compensate the card and call the authorities was really alarming.
That advice from Indigenous Services to call police prompted questions to the minister in the House of Commons today.
All members of society need to know and respect validity of a status card. I only recently got the transcript of the 911 call and in the process of reviewing it. It is slightly unclear, but if there is an Indigenous issue, if there's an issue with Indigenous Services Canada and its involvement, we will act swiftly.
In a statement, BMO said it deeply regrets the situation. The VPD says a policy review is underway, and as for Johnson's 2 human rights cases,
I do hope it helps other Native people with status cards and big businesses. They have to educate themselves on First Nation status cards like it's government issued, and we shouldn't have any trouble with it anywhere.
Angela Starrett, CBC News, Vancouver.
BC charities and nonprofits are grappling with mounting revenue declines amid the pandemic. Many organizations have had to pivot away from in-person fundraising due to COVID-19 restrictions. As our John Hernandez reports tonight, that means shrinking budgets for organizations already squeezing every last penny.
It can be a lot of work caring for big and exotic birds.
They have big cages and they have big poop.
Just ask the workers and volunteers at Greyhaven Bird Sanctuary, where new COVID-19 restrictions mean there's a smaller crew than usual.
We've sort of taken a step back again. Today we only have 2 people in the shelter. We try to have a bit more than 2, but we have stopped new intake of volunteers again.
This nonprofit tries to find homes for these birds, many of them abandoned. It runs on a tight budget, the bulk of the funds from donations raised at events like open houses.
But when you see them and you see the personalities that come through, it's so much easier to open your wallet.
Events that have had to be shifted online amid the pandemic and aren't quite generating the same kind of money.
When you're caring for over 100 birds and your money is 15% down, it's a punch in the gut, for sure.
Across the board, nonprofits and charities in BC have taken a major financial hit.
We all connect with nonprofits and charities across the province, and the vulnerability that has showed up is quite scary.
And it's not just small organizations like Greyhaven feeling the squeeze. The Vancouver Aquarium is fighting off bankruptcy after shuttering its doors. Even major institutions like the BC Cancer Foundation are feeling the hit. It's expecting a revenue drop in the tens of millions of dollars after moving marquee fundraisers online.
I think we just need to adjust. We're being very mindful of our costs. And I mean, the flip side is when you can't do these mass events, your costs do significantly decrease.
And even with vaccines on the horizon, most don't anticipate a return to normal anytime soon.
We are certainly planning for another year of a similar type environment.
A diverse sector kept afloat by the passionate few at its core. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
Longtime BC MLA and former cabinet minister Shirley Bond has been named the interim leader of the BC Liberal Party. Bond is replacing Andrew Wilkinson, who announced Saturday he would be stepping aside to make room for new leadership in wake of a poor election performance in October. Bond has been the MLA for Prince George Valemount since 2001 and was also the province's first female attorney general in 2011. The party's MLAs will be officially sworn in this Friday, and the BC legislature will return for a brief session starting December 7th. CBC British Columbia's Food Bank Day is going to look a bit different this year, but it's still in support of an important cause, local food banks across BC. Join us online and on Radio 1, December 4th. And Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now. Looking forward to Food Bank Open House Day?
Yeah, big time. I mean, it will be different this year, but in a way, I think it could be more intimate. You know, I'm excited to host a virtual weather class.
Yes, everybody
so
will like
sign
that.
up. Yeah, well, spots are limited. And I mean, some inside information, like exactly how close are my baby dog and husband during the live shots, like right now. So I would
pressing questions of the day.
Exactly. But yeah, it's gonna be good, right?
Good stuff. Okay, we're all registered December 4th, and make sure you do register online. That's the way to
exactly. It's all for a great cause.
Absolutely. Okay, and how are we looking weather-wise?
Well, we have said goodbye to the rain for a moment. It's dry outside right now. Let's look at the current temperatures. Temperatures have not really been our story this week. Sort of the temperatures we've been feeling the past couple of days will continue over the next 5 days. 7 at YVR right now. Look at the satellite and radar, a nice little clearing. Well, we've lost the sunshine, but it is relatively clear as we sit between two systems. This is the cold front that is coming down the south coast that is going to bring us a good amount of rain tomorrow afternoon. You can see the yellows in the bullseye. Could be looking at some heavier downpours as that cold front tracks into Metro Vancouver. I'll take you through to the next sunny break, though, because, Mike, I think we've got a few more before the end of the week. That's coming up.
All right, we'll look forward to that. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Well, it is likely not a burning issue in the minds of most people, but the District of North Vancouver is considering pulling the plug on late-night Christmas lights. The municipality is weighing a motion called nuisance lighting that would make it against the law to have the Christmas lights on after 11 o'clock at night. The District of North Van would also enact further rules on the display of seasonal lighting on homes that would only be allowed to have their lights up from November 15th to January 15th. The motion is stirring up debate and concern online.
I think in 2020 we need as much cheer and brightness that we can get.
Well, I think we have to do everything we can to preserve the sustainability of this earth.
I don't think it's a big deal to turn off your Christmas lights, save a little bit of power.
I think that's crazy. We've shut off so much in 2020. I think shutting off lights is the wrong step.
I think it's a good idea because I would like to see less electricity wasted.
The virtual council meeting deciding the fate of Christmas lights starts tonight at 7 o'clock. Well, speaking of shining lights, an Abbotsford athlete is making his mark on the National Football League, setting records with some groundbreaking performances.
You think this is a new phase of the offense?
I do. I think it's an extra phase to the offense.
Deep shot! Caught! Touchdown! Claypool!
He's done that a lot, and with that touchdown yesterday, Chase Claypool became just the 4th rookie ever to catch 10 touchdown passes in his first 10 career games. He's the first to do it since the American Football League and NFL merged back in 1970. And it's the first time it's happened in 60 years. Claypool's success is a big reason his team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, is the only NFL team with no losses this season. And a reminder, you can also watch this newscast live on CBC Gem. CBC Vancouver is also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Well, it's not a title you wish to hold. Canada's COVID capital. Why the infection rate is so bad there and what's being done and what isn't. That's next. And thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream tonight. Well, a teenager on Prince Edward Island has turned his worries about the bat population into a small business. He's building and selling bat houses, and as Nancy Russell reports, he hopes it'll help people understand more about them.
This is where Dominic Davis builds his bat houses, made by hand one at a time. It all started with his grade 8 science project about the little brown bat. The provincial science fair was cancelled because of COVID-19. Davis's mother suggested he start building bat houses. She posted one online, and the orders came flying in.
I thought it was amazing. Like, I didn't think people would have that much of an interest in my company as soon as it started off, because it's bat houses. But then apparently bats are extremely important.
Davis has now built more than 60 bat houses. He gives customers an information sheet about bats with every purchase, hoping to spread what he has learned about bats.
They eat a lot of insects and they're really cool mammals. When they are around your area, the amount of bugs will be reduced, and for us, we live in the country, so it's a big help.
Davis also hopes he can correct some common misconceptions about bats.
Bats aren't blind and they will stay away from you. They won't fly into your hair.
This is the original bat house built for the science project. Dominic's family has been impressed by the response to the bat houses, including his father, Clint.
I couldn't believe how fast it kept going and how many people were getting interested in bats.
Customers, too, are impressed. Joe Rooney has 5 bat houses at his home in Mount Mellick.
He shows his entrepreneur spirit that he's making these bat houses, making himself a few dollars, but he's also educating people about the bats and hopefully bring them back.
Davis hopes Betty Buy Bats will give the bat population on PEI a much-needed boost after years of decline because of disease.
Every time I build a bat house, it's a bat sanctuary, because when you put it up, bats are safe from almost all predators.
Davis says a couple of businesses in the area are now selling the bat houses for him. He says he'll keep building them as long as people want them. Nancy Russell, CBC News, Riverton.
There you go. All right, back in just a couple of moments. A lot more on COVID-19 from right across the country. Stay with us. Alberta is reporting 1,549 new cases of COVID-19 tonight. That's almost exactly the same as Ontario's number, and Alberta has 1/3 of Ontario's population. And hospitalizations have already more than doubled this month. Carolyn Dunn is tracking that province's coronavirus response, which so far has involved resisting restrictions seen elsewhere in Canada.
Gift shop owner Tara Chakowski is expecting some sort of COVID restrictions to be announced tomorrow. She's making contingency plans for whatever happens, but wishes it had come earlier.
Small businesses, retail businesses, we rely on this revenue from December, and closing us down is going to hurt.
Alberta's test positivity rate is 8%, suggesting a lot of cases are going undetected. An even larger surge of hospitalizations and ICU admissions are inevitable at this point, according to Alberta's top doctor.
This is like a snowball rolling down a hill, growing bigger and faster, and it will continue unless we implement strong measures to stop.
Doctors are warning the impacts are already being felt well beyond COVID units.
Hip surgeries are being cancelled. There are longer waits for medical imaging, which can delay a cancer diagnosis. Entire clinics are being cancelled because the doctor or the nurse who's working is sick or in isolation and can't attend.
The anger and despair on display at Health Minister Tyler Shandro's district office shows how much public pressure Alberta's cabinet faces as they decide what restrictions to mandate. And that political pressure is pulling both ways. A new poll released today shows while 81% of Albertans surveyed support a province-wide mask mandate, only 61% would approve a 14 to 28-day lockdown of non-essential businesses. Those against restrictions are vocal and, according to that poll, overwhelmingly conservative, part of a political base that has been pushing for few, if any, restrictions. But with growing impacts on the healthcare system, some kind of restrictions are coming to Alberta. The only question, how far will they go? Carolyn Dunn, CBC News, Calgary.
Many small businesses in Toronto and Peel have been forced to close their doors once again after Ontario ordered another lockdown. But many of those owners are pushing back. They told CBC's Greg Ross it's unfair to allow big chain box stores to remain open while independent stores struggle to keep their businesses alive.
This is Mabel the third.
The cat who lives in this Davisville children's bookshop, Mabel's Fables. Usually during the holiday season, Mabel is greeting a lot of customers. Store owner Eleanor Lefebvre says this is usually their busiest time of the year.
I think is probably, I'm not exaggerating by saying 25% of our yearly retail sales. It in fact helps us pay the bills in those deadly days in January and February.
Lefebvre is hoping to keep her head above water by offering online services and curbside pickup, but that's not an option for everyone.
I think I should be allowed to keep the doors open.
Bradley Rothblatt's store, Bins, is just a few blocks away on Yonge Street. He says smaller stores can do a far better job of enforcing COVID regulations than bigger stores can.
The minute you walk in the door, all the staff check to make sure the mask is on properly. If it's not, we tell them to pull it up. We have hand sanitizer right at the entrance.
It seems like they would start with small businesses where it's easier, far easier to physically distance than pushing traffic to big box stores.
Dan Kelly is the president of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. He's encouraging the province to consider a small business first strategy during this lockdown.
If it's unsafe to buy a book in an independent bookstore, how is it safe to go and buy a book in a lineup at Costco?
Now they're pulling out every single small business owner.
The premier seemed exasperated when asked about this today.
It's tough. It's tough to balance the health and the well-being of society, because that's the #1 priority, in the economy. It's a challenge.
Manitoba is also in lockdown. Their box stores like Walmart and Costco can only sell essential items, forcing them to close off other areas of the store. But Premier Ford is not willing to do the same here.
It'd be a logistical nightmare. They have essential items spread out throughout their whole store.
But some small business owners fear that if nothing is done, many will be forced to close their doors for good, which could have a ripple effect on the remaining small businesses.
The whole idea with a main street is you park and you do a few things on your street. And it's not going to help us if other stores fail. It's not going to be good for the city to have empty storefronts.
Today, the Premier urged those small business owners to look into some of the financial aid that is available to them for things like paying rent and wages. And he also asked that they remain patient as the province tries to get this virus under control. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Donald Trump came the closest he has yet to admitting he lost the U.S. election. Not quite, though. As Susan Ormiston tells us, the authority in charge of transitions gave Joe Biden the green light, and Trump says he's told his team to cooperate.
16 days after the election was called, Joe Biden finally gets the green light to proceed. The General Services Administrator tonight declaring he is the apparent winner, which formalizes the transition. Biden's incoming and Trump's outgoing teams will now coordinate to turn over power. Giving into the obvious, Trump tweeted, "Do what needs to be done, but our case strongly continues and I believe we'll prevail." Close to acknowledging he's lost, sort of, as Biden begins to shape his cabinet.
America's back. We're going to be back in the game. It's not American alone.
He's choosing trusted personal allies.
To introduce a man who has been my mentor, my partner, my friend.
Antony Blinken as Secretary of State, one of several Obama-era deputies, and some firsts. If confirmed, the first woman to head up national intelligence, the first Latino to lead Homeland Security, and expected to be named the first woman to head up Treasury.
The practical things are what we have to deal with.
Biden with Kamala Harris is looking for experience over chaos. John Kerry will be key as special envoy for climate, telegraphing how much Biden intends to elevate environmental issues inside this White House. It is clearer tonight that President Trump is running out of ramp. Georgia will count its votes for a third time tomorrow, but Michigan certified for Biden today. And now he will get those security and pandemic briefings, which had been delayed for weeks. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Washington.
It is where it all began. Coming up, the CBC takes you to Wuhan, China, the epicenter of the global pandemic that's now a boomtown.
Sunday, the BC Lions won the CFL championship, and that entitles them to two things, the Grey Cup and a hometown victory parade. Vancouver lived up to that tradition today, but in some rather untraditional weather. Karen Webb reports.
It is rare enough for the BC Lions to win the Grey Cup, but it's even rarer for them to celebrate their success in the snow. For the past week, the people of Vancouver have endured an unseasonal and downright un-West Coast cold snap.
Well, it's kind of cold, but it's worth it. We've waited years for this. I think it's great. I love it. It adds a little something.
In spite of the cold, -8, a couple of thousand people lined the parade route to catch a close-up glimpse of the Lions and the Grey Cup. The snow and the cold didn't seem to make a difference to too many people. The victory celebration itself was held indoors under the dome in BC Place. For the players, it was back to shirt sleeves and civilized temperatures. About 10,000 people came out to roar their approval of last Sunday's victory.
Right now, I feel real good. I know my teammates feel real good, and I know you feel real good. We're number one, and you're number one. All right.
The last time the BC Lions brought home the Grey Cup was 1964. Rather than wait another 21 years, the team would like to repeat as Grey Cup winners next year, when the game will be held in BC Place, away from whatever winter weather comes to British Columbia. Karen Webb, CBC News, Vancouver.
It's the BC Miniature Club's annual show. The common scale used is 1 inch to the foot. There are up to 100 separate displays, everything from fully furnished houses and shops to Christmas and animal scenes, and they're all incredibly detailed. They say the total value of the works on display is around $200,000. That's just the direct value. It doesn't take into account the thousands of hours of patient, meticulous work performed by the creators of the miniature masterpieces. One particularly eye-catching display is that of Ken Manning. His specialty is musical instruments of the string variety. He has everything from banjos to balalaicas and violins to violas and harps. The pieces each sell for between $200 and $375, and they take a lot of Manning's time.
Generally about 40 hours or so for a guitar, and violin is about 70 hours, bass fiddle 70 hours, something like that.
The money that the Miniature Club has left over after expenses are paid goes to the Children's Hospital. The show continues tomorrow at Sunset Community Centre in South Vancouver.
Some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Well, I was pretty surprised that they said we were South Asian people with status cards, and it just blew my mind when they said that.
An Indigenous grandfather who was handcuffed along with his 12-year-old granddaughter at a downtown Vancouver Bank of Montreal have launched 2 human rights complaints. It happened back in March. And today, transcripts of a confusing 911 call to Vancouver police by the branch manager were released. Critics say the communication reveals clear examples of systemic racism.
I'm asking you to put the safety measures at the top of your list every day, rather than thinking about where the gaps are, where the shortcuts are. Is there a workaround? Is there a way I can get around this order?
Dr. Bonnie Henry is pleading with British Columbians to follow her recent health orders aimed at slowing the spread of COVID-19. All indoor and outdoor events of any size have been suspended. That means popular events like the Stanley Park Christmas Train and Van Dusen Botanical Gardens Festival of Lights in Vancouver have been put on hold. Henry clarified that movie theaters must also be closed. And Dr. Henry is reporting 17 more deaths from COVID-19 over the weekend, along with almost 2,000 new cases. Almost 90% of the new cases are in the Fraser Health and Vancouver coastal regions. The number of people in hospital is now at 277, another new high. In China, a new round of mass testing is underway for coronavirus after new cases of community spread were detected. The fear and the government's heavy-handed response harken back to the beginning of this entire pandemic. Then the city of Wuhan went into lockdown. Sasha Petrusek recently traveled back to see what's changed.
Wuhan's garment district is abuzz. Carts jostle and deals are made. Stores are stocked. Meals are served. At first glance here, COVID has been conquered. Living and making a living seems easy again. But venture into the back lanes where seamstresses work for a few dollars a day, and you'll see the stitching is a little slower, the customers fewer. Too many of the stores Hu Wei-yong rents out sit empty. Since the lockdown, he says, Wuhan seems like a dead city to me. It's like we pressed the pause button. We're very afraid, still living in the shadow of COVID. The scars of this scare are never far from the surface. Making money doesn't seem as important anymore, says Lu Lihua. Just living is the priority. This central Chinese city was the first to feel the full consequences of COVID after the virus was discovered here in January. A metropolis of more than 10 million on the Yangtze River, shut down and cut off from the world in a matter of hours. Many in Wuhan look back on the lockdown as a nightmare, though now few dare criticize it publicly. There are stories of people feeling imprisoned in their own homes, sometimes quite literally, with the doors welded shut. They talk about shortages of food and medical care and a serious lack of reliable information. As the rest of China was preparing to celebrate Lunar New Year, the orders to lock down came from Beijing. 加油, Wuhan! 加油, Within hours, people were ordered into their homes. Police rounded up residents suspected to be sick. At the time, it all seemed so draconian, the kind of thing only a dictatorship like China might do. But there was reason to panic. The deadly virus, apparently spreading from stalls at the city's seafood market, was taking its toll. Bodies were collected from apartments all over the city. A grim count of corpses piled up outside Wuhan's hospitals. Inside, there was plenty of grief at the bedside. My father, he says, he's gone. He stopped breathing. Hospitals were in disarray. Patients parked in hallways, shortages of doctors, beds, and equipment. It didn't have to be quite so frantic. As early as December, 1 month before, a Wuhan doctor alerted his colleagues to a strange new disease infecting patients. But Dr. Li Wenliang was silenced by police. He later died from COVID, becoming a popular hero as whistleblower. Today, Wuhan's seafood market, considered by many as ground zero for this pandemic, is closed, decorated outside, abandoned on the inside. But around here, none of it is forgotten, certainly not by Dr. Yu Chengping, who was on the front lines as COVID spread and ended up being the first doctor infected in January. COVID wiped him out for 3.5 months, he says in a rare interview with Western media. I was very weak after I got sick, he says. It was life-threatening. I lost some 15 kilograms, and even now, I have trouble breathing. But as a doctor, I learned a lot. He says the Chinese government didn't recognize the seriousness of the problem at first because the number of infections seemed low. But he says once it did, Beijing did the right thing with a strict lockdown.
我说国外控制不住的，他们当时笑，国外为什么控制不住？
That's why it's so difficult for other countries to control the virus, he says. Isolation is so important, yet people elsewhere insist on freedom.
一个家庭、一个社区的隔离。
So while North America and Europe struggle with a deluge of COVID cases, officially there hasn't been a single locally transmitted case here in months. Nothing to distract from lazy afternoons fishing on the banks of the Yangtze or busy Saturdays shopping downtown. Still, the human cost remains high for Shi Shuli and her husband. A musician she can only watch perform on her phone now. Back in January, right as Wuhan's lockdown was starting, he collapsed at home with a high fever. She went from hospital to hospital trying to get him admitted, finally finding one that wasn't already full. Doctors sent him straight into intensive care, ICU. He had COVID. I'd heard COVID stories. I was so afraid, she says. I was so sad and afraid I would never see him again, she says. I was just left with his clothes. Wuhan is full of sad stories this year. Still, many feel they've survived tough times and even dodged death. They drink to continued health and even to Wuhan's nightmare lockdown, which many think the world needs to emulate.
The CBC's Sasha Petrusek reporting tonight from Wuhan, China. At 19 minutes in front of 7 o'clock on this Monday evening, a live look at downtown Vancouver tonight. Not too bad a day on the South Coast. What's it going to be like for the rest of the week? Johanna's forecast is coming next.
Building the Earth. It's never been done before. It's going to be talked about for ages. It's a huge feat in not only Minecraft history, but gaming history. This is the Build the Earth project, and the goal is to build a perfect one-to-one real-life scale replica of the whole Earth in Minecraft. So right now we're sitting in a coffee shop inside of the Halifax Central Library in Halifax, Nova Scotia. This was built by certainly our best builder here, who's done a lot of the work. His name is Liam McDonald. And oh my God, no, this is Liam. There he is. This was started by Pippin FTS. And he's a YouTuber. He released a video where he proposed this idea, and the video went totally viral. It's currently got over 11 million views on YouTube. And so he stumbled upon this mod, Terra 1-to-1.
The Terra 1-to-1 mod takes the information from Google Maps and other geographical data archives and compiles it to create the 1-to-1 scale of the Earth in Minecraft terrain generation. But I don't want to stand alone in this project. That's why I'm calling for all Minecrafters around the world, skilled builders and organizations, to join in on this effort.
I joined the Canada team, which was a team specifically devoted to making the country Canada, and I worked my way up, and I'm now one of the owners of the team. And I own the Halifax area. I should make it clear there's definitely no global server right now. A lot of people seem to think that, but no, it's divided by teams and stuff. The end goal is basically to have all these teams that are building on their own servers, take their world files, their finished files of the worlds, and to stitch them all together into one giant world file, and then hopefully make that a public server so that people can join. Honestly, it's huge. I think the cities that have the most progress are probably Montreal and Ottawa and Yellowknife. And it's really impressive, some of the stuff. Definitely nothing like this has ever been attempted. Perfect scale, whole Earth, completely accurate, never been done before.
The Market Report is brought to you by Fortis BC. We've got even bigger rebates. Whoa! On select high-efficiency equipment for business, but only for a limited time.
Johanna Wagstaffe back now with the forecast. It was, I don't know, it was kind of one of those meh Mondays. Like, I don't even remember it, really, weather-wise. It was just kind of,
It could have been the weather. It could have been Monday. Could have been end of November. Yeah. But no, you're right. It was a bit of a mess start to the week. We've got some more interesting weather to talk to over the next couple of days. But yeah, sort of waiting for breaks between systems is the story over the next 5 days. Let me show you the temperatures across the province right now. We are basically seasonal, although we've had some mild overnight lows this month. I'm going to see if I can put together some information in the next couple of months, because that is a trend we are seeing more and more over recent decades, is warm overnights. But our afternoon highs have been about seasonal, one right now in Prince George and Kamloops. Watch this cold front as it heads towards the south coast. It's bringing some snow in through central coastal sections tonight, and that will get down to Metro Vancouver tomorrow afternoon. So we might start off with just some showers, ramping up to some steadier rain for Victoria and Vancouver through the afternoon hours. Behind that front, we'll look for gusty winds. In fact, gusty winds ahead of the front too, just shifting winds as it passes. And then watch that low pressure system. It's going to be our story as we head into Tuesday night into Wednesday. I'm hoping it dissipates out a little quicker than the latest model runs are showing, because right now it's leaving a few lingering showers in through Wednesday. But if it clears out a little sooner, we could be looking at an all sunny Wednesday. So I'll keep watching that tomorrow. 9 in through Victoria tomorrow, 3 over towards Cranbrook. Really the only place seeing some sunshine in the afternoon. Kind of flurries for everyone to start. Gusty in the Okanagan, a rain snow mix for you to kick things off. Look at the 5-day forecast. So mainly rainy tomorrow. And again, look for those winds, particularly before and after that front crosses in the afternoon. Hoping for a mainly dry and sunny Wednesday, but still keeping the risk of some showers in there. Rain does return for Thursday, but again, all depending on when that low kicks out. We might end up with a drier Thursday as well. The system moving in for Friday, though, that's pretty much a guarantee. A wetter end to the week, but most of the models trending towards a sunny end to the week. Just saved a little bit of time to show you what's going on the other side of the country. Big storm hitting Atlantic Canada right now. There are blizzard warnings in place up towards Labrador, where parts of Labrador, including the Trans-Labrador Highway, are expecting 100 centimeters tonight, Mike. So very different stories on either sides of the country.
Okay, Joe, thanks. We will talk to you again in just a few minutes here. Well, it is a familiar problem here in the Lower Mainland, the homeless forced to shelter in tents. But even in some of Canada's more remote communities, it's a growing issue. In Labrador, one community is grappling with the issue. And as Garrett Berry explains, with COVID-19 restrictions, and as Johanna just told you, brutal weather conditions on the way, a disaster is brewing.
Must be the site because there's flows there.
Not far from homes in Happy Valley Goose Bay.
Isn't that something?
Smokes, beer, chips, jeans, the markings of a makeshift camp.
They have nowhere to go. They just have no place to go.
Across town, there are dozens of sites just like this. They're found, they're moved, and they're set up again.
They don't have nowhere to go. Well, the only thing that they could do is just have alcohol. Like there's nowhere or nothing.
Semiak has been there himself.
Last year I've been charged for mischief.
This summer, cold, wet, in the middle of the night with nowhere to go, he lit an illegal fire on the forested trails in town.
I could have perished that night.
An impossible choice that he fears is becoming more and more common.
No, there's a lot of homeless people around here in Happy Valley Goose Bay, and since COVID come around, there's hardly any places that we could go to.
What little was available, the drop-in warm room, the library, the monthly soup kitchen, has been closed or cut back because of COVID-19.
Anything that touches your heart is a difficult decision as far as I'm concerned. Anything to do with people.
Leaving the homeless alone and wandering.
There's nothing really can do is just walk around the whole community.
And it's getting colder.
A lot of us don't have no place to go. It's really scary. I'm frightened for this year's people.
Dawn Crocker knows it all too well.
She was just a kind soul. She was a peaceful lady.
Last winter, working the bar, she lost a friend, Susanna Rich, in that winter cold.
So I asked her if she had a place to go. She told me she had a place. She was going to a friend's, and I said, "Now, are you sure, Suzanne?" You know, she said, "Oh yes, I'm okay."
Crocker saw Susanna Rich on Saturday night. By Monday morning, she was found dead in the trails.
It still hurts me yet to think about how she died, cold and alone and froze to death in a trail. And she was sober that night. She just had no place to go.
It happened 3 times last year. 3 people were found dead outside in the trails. Crocker believes the winter cold was a contributing factor, and she feels it coming again.
I know it. People in town know it. People in town are just waiting for to hear it on the news in the morning. You know, a life lost down in the trail. Should never be. Should never be.
And homelessness appears to be growing.
The volume just blew up overnight, it seemed like.
The Housing Hub shelter has been overflowing for months. It was overcrowded even before the pandemic. The service is 4 years old, but operators say they are understaffed, treading water, unable to graduate their clients out of their services.
15 is a comfortable number, I would say, of people that we just haven't found the right fit for them, whether that's private landlords, supportive living, other communities they've tried, they've come back.
So this should be a temporary place for people to stay when they have no housing, and then we need to look at people moving on. At the moment, there's very little moving on.
At night, they'll take in as many as they can fit. They'll use a local inn too. But in the morning, most clients have to leave again.
If other establishments aren't open and welcoming, I'm honestly not sure what's going to happen.
On the weekends, people can't come back for 12 hours. That makes for long days, wandering, just trying to keep warm. Nowhere to eat, no washroom.
It is worrying. There's no doubt about it. There are a few options for them, and there's lots of days when it's really cold. And if there's a snowstorm at 8 o'clock in the morning, you feel really guilty about putting them out through the door. But we don't have the staffing or capacity from this perspective to do any more about it.
Because that's their form of shelter, is this tent.
Crocker's doing something to help, collecting sleeping bags and handing them out all over Labrador. But she says the solutions here need to be much bigger.
How many more years is it going to be before we finally get together as one whole group and do something?
Last year, Mayor Wally Anderson wrote to the provincial government complaining of alcohol use, addictions, panhandling, and violence, asking for intervention. Writing, "We acknowledge there is no easy solution and that the problem is not likely to go away anytime soon, if ever. We contend, however, that the province needs to exercise its authority and provide the necessary supports to deal with the situation." And this year, Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the stakes and fear are high.
It's like staring into the barrel of a gun, knowing it's going to go off, but not knowing when.
It wasn't right for those people to pass away, and no, we need a proper shelter, and we need Newfoundland government to listen to us people, because we matter too.
Garrett Berry, CBC News, Happy Valley Goose Bay.
Still to come tonight, a Christmas boom is underway, with the pandemic driving people to go all out this holiday season. What's the end result? We'll find out next.
In front of the Irish Embassy pub, a glimpse of the change that's coming. The historic grey stone facade will stay, but there will be a 10-story tower behind it. Inside, the first 6 floors will be hotel apartments. The top 4 floors will be condo units. The pub's general manager says it's not the end for the nightlife landmark.
You know, we've been part of downtown now for 20-25 years, and this is what we do.
Cannon says it's been a difficult few years, with construction on Bishop and a fire that gutted the bar in 2018. The bar never reopened afterwards and has been looking to relocate ever since.
We're actively looking to relocate the Irish Embassy. It's just something that we just haven't found the right spot, and something that made sense for us.
It's no secret downtown and Bishop Street are changing, and businesses have had to adapt. But the developer behind the project says the street is modernizing, and even with new buildings going up, it won't feel totally different.
We are keeping the beautiful heritage building. We are keeping the commercial space, so the nature of the building there is not changing.
One option being looked at is having the pub reopen there in commercial space on the ground floor.
We'd love for them to rent or buy the space.
Cannon says the pub is looking at its options and hopes to stay in the downtown area, whether it's on Bishop Street or nearby. Valeria Corey Minocchio, CBC News, Montreal.
Meh, meh, meh. Deer are such wonderful, gentle spirits of the forest, is what I think of them as.
Woodlands Wildlife Sanctuary, Christina speaking.
My name is Monica Melikar, and I operate the Woodlands Wildlife Sanctuary here in Minden, Ontario. We take in orphaned, injured, and sick wildlife, and we rehabilitate them and release them back into the wild. This is Ivy. May long weekend, we received a call from a man who was cottaging with his family. He heard crying in the bush. All night long, a cry, 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 cry. In the morning, he went out to investigate what it was, and that's when he discovered a fawn.
You can do it.
It was soaking wet, it was very weak and dehydrated.
Yeah, we got it.
They called us to see what they should do. Always our first thing to say is, well, if he can still stand and he's crying out, let's just make sure that there's no mother around. And within a few hours, that fawn was crying again and walking around and stumbling. So we realized it is quite weak and it is very dehydrated. She nuzzled us and she recognized us almost as her caregivers or as her saviors. You've helped save an animal's life, and then to see it released and on its own. It's better than raising kids. It's faster too. Meh, meh. Meh.
We were looking forward to seeing you at our open house, but things are different this year. Last year, we raised more than $1 million for local food banks across BC. We're not going to let 2020 stop us.
It's great to see you.
Especially at a time when the food banks need support the most.
I'm so glad you asked.
Join us online and on Radio 1 for CBC British Columbia's Food Bank Day on December 4th.
Well, feeling a bit down in the cold and the wet of a classic BC autumn is pretty much a time-honored tradition.
Yes, indeed it is. And add COVID-19 and the latest restrictions to the mix, and it can leave many of us feeling downright blue. But some are fighting back, Joe, with a holiday tradition tailor-made for physical distancing. Christmas lights and decorations are flying off store shelves, more so than normal, at least according to one Canadian Tire on Vancouver Island. Tree farms busier than ever. Lighting companies are scrambling to keep up with orders as people try to bring a little more color and holiday spirit to their world.
We're a little more distant these days, but I think those little charms that you see as you're walking around really do help.
We just need more lights.
Yeah.
People love Christmas. Makes
Right.
them feel good.
These people are crazy.
Crazy for decorations, yeah.
I went all out this weekend. Have you put the decorations up already?
The decorations have been retrieved from storage, massive boxes dragged into the house. We're ready to go.
This is your weekend. This is your weekend. I feel like we're not alone in the early ones this year. It's time.
Exactly. All right, thanks, Joe, and thank you for joining us tonight. Tina Lovegreen in for Dan Burrett tonight at 11, right after The National. Have a good night.